Mark Twain Selected Works. Extract from Chapter 4 of The Innocents Abroad.
One of our favorite youths, Jack, a splendid young fellow with a head full of good sense and a pair of legs that were a wonder to look upon, in the way of length and straightness and slimness, used to report progress every morning in the most glowing and spirited way, and say, "Oh, I'm coming along bully." He was a little given to slang in his happier moods. I wrote 10 pages in my journal last night, and I wrote 9 the night before and 12 the night before that. Why, it's only fun. What do you find to put in it, Jack? Oh, everything. Latitude and longitude, noon every day, and how many miles we made last 24 hours, and all the domino games I beat, and horse billiards, and whales and sharks and porpoises, and the text of the sermon Sundays, because that'll tell at home, and the ships we saluted, and what nation they were, and which way the wind was, and whether there was a heavy sea, and what sail we carried, though we don't ever carry any, principally, going against a headwind always. Wonder what is the reason of that? And how many lies Moult has told. Oh, everything. I've got everything down. My father told me to keep that journal. Father wouldn't take $1,000 for it when I get it done. No, Jack, it will be worth more than $1,000 when you get it done. Do you? No, but do you think it will, though? Yes, it will be worth at least as much as $1,000 when you get it done. Maybe more. Well, I about half think so myself. It ain't no slouch of a journal. But it shortly became a most lamentable slouch of a journal. One night in Paris, after a hard day's toil and sightseeing, I said, "Now I'll go and stroll around the cafes a while, Jack, and give you a chance to write up your journal, old feller." His countenance lost its fire. He said, "Well, no, you needn't mind. I think I won't run that journal any more. It is awful tedious. I reckon I'm as much as 4,000 pages behindhand. I haven't got any France in it at all. First, I thought I'd leave France out and start fresh. But that wouldn't do, would it? The governor would say, 'Hello, here, didn't see anything in France? That cat wouldn't fight, First, I thought I'd copy France out of the guidebook, like old Badger in the forward cabin, who's writing a book, but there's more than 300 pages of it. Oh, I don't think a journal's any use. Do you? They're only a bother, ain't they?' Yes, a journal that is incomplete isn't of much use. But a journal properly kept is worth $1,000 when you got it done. 1,000? Well, I should think so. I wouldn't finish it for $1 million. His experience was only the experience of the majority of that industrious night school in the cabin. If you wish to inflict a heartless and malignant punishment upon a young person, pledge him to keep a journal a year. A good many expedients were resorted to keep the excursionists amused and satisfied. A club was formed of all the passengers, which met in the writing school after prayers and read aloud about the countries we were approaching and discussed the information so obtained. Several times the photographer of the expedition brought out his transparent pictures and gave us a handsome magic lantern exhibition. His views were nearly all of foreign scenes, but there were 1 or 2 home pictures among them. He advertised that he would open his performance in the after cabin at 2 bells, 9 p.m., and show the passengers where they shall eventually arrive. Which was all very well, but by a funny accident, the first picture that flamed out upon the canvas was a view of Greenwood Cemetery. On several starlit nights we danced on the upper deck under the awnings, and made something of a ballroom display of brilliancy by hanging a number of ship's lanterns to the stanchions. Our music consisted of the well-mixed strains of a melodeon, which was a little asthmatic, and apt to catch its breath where it ought to come out strong, a clarinet which was a little unreliable on the high keys and rather melancholy on the low ones, and a disreputable accordion that had a leak somewhere and breathed louder than it squawked. A more elegant term does not occur to me just now. However, the dancing was infinitely worse than the music. When the ship rolled to starboard, the whole platoon of dancers came charging down to starboard with it and brought up in mass at the rail. And when it rolled to port, they went floundering down to port with the same unanimity of sentiment. Waltzers spun around precariously for a matter of 15 seconds, and then went scurrying down to the rail as if they meant to go overboard. The Virginia reel, as performed on board the Quaker City, had more genuine reel about it than any reel I ever saw before, and was as full of interest to the spectator as it was full of desperate chances and hairbreadth escapes to the participant. We gave up dancing, finally. We celebrated a lady's birthday anniversary with toasts, speeches, a poem, and so forth. We also had a mock trial. No ship ever went to sea that hadn't a mock trial on board. The purser was accused of stealing an overcoat from stateroom number 10. A judge was appointed, also clerks, a crier of the court, constables, sheriffs, counsel for the state and for the defendant. Witnesses were subpoenaed, and a jury impaneled after much challenging. The witnesses were stupid and unreliable and contradictory, as witnesses always are. The counsel were eloquent, argumentative, and vindictively abusive of each other, as was characteristic and proper. The case was at last submitted and duly finished by the judge with an absurd decision and a ridiculous sentence. The acting of charades was tried on several evenings by the young gentlemen and ladies in the cabins and proved the most distinguished success of all the amusement experiments. An attempt was made to organize a debating club, but it was a failure. There was no oratorical talent in the ship. We all enjoyed ourselves. I think I can safely say that, but it was in a rather quiet way. We very, very seldom played the piano. We played the flute and the clarinet together and made good music, too, what there was of it. But we always played the same old tune. It was a very pretty tune, how well I remember it. I wonder when I shall ever get rid of it. We never played either the melodeon or the organ except at devotions. But I'm too fast. Young Albert did know part of a tune, something about oh something or other, how sweet it is to know that what's his name? I do not remember the exact title of it, but it was very plaintive and full of sentiment. Albert played that pretty much all the time, until we contracted with him to restrain himself. But nobody ever sang by moonlight on the upper deck, and the congregational singing at church and prayers was not of a superior order of architecture. I put up with it as long as I could, and then joined in and tried to improve it. But this encouraged young George to join in, too, and that made a failure of it. Because George's voice was just turning. And when he was singing a dismal sort of bass, it was apt to fly off the handle and startle everybody with a most discordant cackle on the upper notes. George didn't know the tunes either, which was also a drawback to his performances. I said, "Come now, George, don't improvise. It looks too egotistical. It will provoke remark. Just stick to Coronation like the others. It is a good tune. You can't improve it any just offhand in this way." "Why, I'm not trying to improve it. I'm singing like the others, just as it is in the notes." And he honestly thought it was, too. And so he had no one to blame but himself when his voice caught on the center occasionally and gave him the lockjaw. There were those among the unregenerated who attributed the unceasing headwinds to our distressing choir music. There were those who said openly that it was taking chances enough to have such ghastly music going on, even when it was at its best, and that to exaggerate the crime by letting George help was simply flying in the face of Providence. He said that the choir would keep up their lacerating attempts at melody until they would bring down a storm someday that would sink the ship. There were even grumblers at the prayers. The executive officer said the Pilgrims had no charity. There they are, down there every night at 8 bells praying for fair winds, when they know as well as I do that this is the only ship going east this time of the year, but there's 1,000 coming west. What's a fair wind for us is a headwind to them. The Almighty's blowing a fair wind for 1,000 vessels, and this tribe wants him to turn it clear around so as to accommodate one, and she a steamship at that. It ain't good sense. It ain't good reason. It ain't good Christianity. It ain't common human charity. Avast with such nonsense.